80% of wools are from Australia.
They buy our wool, they pay for it, and they process in a very, very good manner.
No single industry has done more to shape the Australian landscape than wool. And while historically Australia has ridden on the sheep's back, it's China that's given wool growers a future.
I'd start by saying that I think China's been an absolute godsend for the Australian wool industry over the last 20 years.
John Roberts has spent much of his career going back and forth to China, drumming up business and attending trade shows such as Shanghai's Spin Expo. Previously a wool exporter, he's now the Eastern Hemisphere General Manager for Australian Wool Innovation, the marketing and research body funded through wool growers' levies.
China take anything from 70 to 80% of our wool clip, and I guess probably a vast majority of that, or a major piece of that, would stay in China as finished garments, and the rest would obviously go over to Europe and the States. So, yeah, it's a vitally important market.
Situated on the Yangtze River, Zhangjiagang has become a major domestic port town and is home to one of China's 11 free trade zones. It's a hub for the world's biggest food and textile companies. They're able to bring goods in, process and re-export without hefty tariffs. It's also the city where most of our wool ends up. Tianyu takes about 10% of the Australian wool clip. The company buys at auction, imports to China and scours. That means washing out the grease and dirt. Landline's visit to Tianyu coincided with the arrival of a busload of Australian wool growers. Helen Hahn often hosts these sorts of tours.
When they come to Tianyu, they're always trying to find the wools from their own farm.
This is the 100% of Australian wool, 17.5 micron.
What becomes clear in visiting places like Tianyu is that while the Australian wool industry is very dependent on Chinese manufacturing, it goes both ways.
What are these machines doing?
Companies like this couldn't exist without our wool.
80% of wools are from Australia. Now we purchase wool globally. The main supplying country is Australia, and then New Zealand and South Africa and some countries of South America.
We're very passionate about wool, so I think it's time for a lot of our clients to understand a little bit further about what happens after the sale of their wool.
Robert Ryan is the managing director of the New South Wales-based brokerage company Shoot Bell. He's been travelling to China for 30 years, but this is the first time he's taken a group of his wool-growing clients.
Comb and remove the vegetable matter, big vegetable matters, and you can see the fiber. Yes, yeah. Comb. Just we comb the hair. Yes.
Carding and combing the wool results in tops. More than half of these will be sent offshore to be spun into yarn. Tianyu is the world's biggest top maker. Do you ever get concerned that the Australian wool industry is too reliant on China?
We are a little concerned from time to time, but really they buy our wool, they pay for it, and they process in a very, very good manner.
But things are getting tougher for the industry in China too. The central government now insists factory effluent be treated to almost drinking quality. Labour costs are rising, and Helen Hahn says demand for the woven suiting fabric is decreasing.
The main consumption of wool top is Italy and also China. I think both the economic situation in China and Europe all is not so good at the moment. So the demand is reducing.
Well, Tianyu is an early stage processor of wool. On the other side of Zhangjiagang, Sunshine Group is a massive, vertically integrated business, doing everything from scouring to suiting. From the marbled front foyer to the impressive boardroom, it's clear this is no rundown sweatshop. The 30-year-old company is the world's biggest producer of worsted fabric, typically used in making tailored garments. Director Cao Shuming says it's also been the world's single biggest user of Australian wool.
阳光是澳洲羊毛最大的一个使用的生产企业，因为从30年来的话，阳光的面料呢，几乎99%以上使用的都是澳洲羊毛，所以说我感觉的呢，阳光和澳洲是一家人。
Inside Sunshine's 140-hectare manufacturing plant, yarn is spun, then woven into fabric. 15,000 employees produce a staggering 35,000 kilometres of fabric each year, making 3.5 million suits.
This suit we made for a UK brand called Eagle.
The average wool worker's wage is 3,000 RMB a month, about 600 Australian dollars. They typically work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's not huge pay by Australian standards, but it's an escalating cost for Chinese employers. So much so that some factories are moving their operations to cheaper countries. Later this year, a third of Sunshine's manufacturing will relocate to Ethiopia.
整个这个项目的启动呢，是从去年的这个时候，有将近1年的时间了，就是同埃塞政府的一个我们选址呀、谈判呀、一些合同的一些协议合作的细节的一种商定。
The company is investing $980 million in Ethiopia and plans to employ 6,000 people there while reducing their Chinese workforce.
Labour costs a bit and effluent treatment and all of those things are catching up with China. They had a terrific advantage earlier on when things were much cheaper to employ people, to treat their effluent, and there was funds to establish new mills. That's changed a bit and the cost of living has gone up significantly, the salaries have gone up significantly, and so on. So those companies now are looking to go offshore to maybe re-establish themselves in other areas.
There's a bit of a saying that you need to build factories on wheels these days just to keep up with the times.
Is there a risk for the Australian wool industry that we have all our eggs in one basket, and that basket being China?
As far as sovereign risk is concerned, look, I'm not so convinced it's a major issue. I mean, GDP growth in China is still fantastic. I mean, whilst it hasn't been as high as it was 10 years ago, their economy is still good. We have an emerging markets strategy in place as well. So we're always looking at the next China. That's not to say we're turning our back on the current China market, far from it, but certainly it's important to have the follow-on plan in place.
Cambodia, Bangladesh, Vietnam and Myanmar are all shaping up as alternative options. Deirdre and Graham Brown run merinos out the back of Bourke. They visited China wanting to gauge whether there was a future for wool production.
Well, they're planning not only more mills in China, but more mills in other countries as well, you know, and they're on the front foot as far as I'm concerned, and that's good. That gives us a bit more confidence that we're going with wool.
You're obviously the base of younger farmers. What do you think the future is for the wool industry now that you've seen the China end?
Yeah, it is encouraging. They do like the woolen products, so yeah, I think if we can keep producing them they'll keep using it.
Yeah, and Sam,
Yeah, I think the same, and what they can do with it these days, they're doing more and more things with it all the time. You know, it's not just they're not just sewing wool together and making clothing. You know, they're doing a lot of things with it, so that's encouraging. And as us, you know, it looks like there is a future there. Yeah.